Welcome back, and we are now going to go into the mastering session. Okay, I'm going to kind of approach this in a two-step thing because I want to look at the mastering, right? From not only just the micro perspective, but also the overall big picture perspective, lah. Mastering is definitely one of the most misunderstood terms and misunderstood concepts when it comes to the whole music production process lah. There are a lot of misunderstandings what mastering can do. A lot of the laypersons and average musicians sometimes think that mixing and mastering is the same thing, or it's part of the same workflow. It's not. It's a totally separate process, which is usually again done by two different people, separate people. So mixing engineer does the mix. Mastering engineer has a total different set of skill set, equipment, and mental approach as well. It's also very, very different. Now, but before going into all those details, let me just sort of give you a definition. What the real definition of mastering is. So mastering is the preparation of the final mix, right, or the final master, is the preparation of a master for the medium that is supposed to be released on. That's basically it. You're preparing the master for whatever medium that is going to be released to the public. So what's the medium, right? What is medium that we're talking about? Medium. Okay, so that's actually the plural. Media is actually that. So if we go back to, let's say, the early days of recording, right, of modern recording technology, the medium that we are talking about would be vinyls, right? Vinyl records. Okay. In the past, mastering involved transferring the mix, okay, be it mixed down to a tape or something, transferring that from the tape medium, from the mixing console, and actually very often from the mix console directly onto the vinyl record, right? So immediately, directly, it is engraved. It's immediately they will cut the either the rough ones, they use a material called acetate, okay, right? The final ones, okay, the ones that's being sold to the public is vinyl lah, right? The black vinyl records lah. Surprisingly, vinyl records to this day are still around. They still have quite a strong popularity, right? Especially amongst music fans because of it's somehow because of their special value lah. So somehow it's not dead, and it's actually right in the past decade or so, the sales of vinyl has actually gone up. As you see, actually some bands and some artists, they will release maybe limited edition runs of vinyl. So in a nice package inside the nice vinyl record sleeve with all the artwork and everything, and actually it's cool, right? So especially for their collectors and their hardcore fans, right? They will love to buy these sort of things because it's special, right? Somehow the experience, the physical experience of looking at the vinyl record, opening the sleeve, putting it on the turntable and playing it, has got that magic feeling to it lah. So it used to be on that medium. Okay, then transition to late 70s, early 80s, CD, compact disc. Okay, so with CD, with digital audio and CD, it opened up a whole world of possibilities. One thing about vinyl records is that it has limited dynamic range. As you remember, dynamic range means the maximum between what's the softer sounds and the louder sounds. So vinyl has a limited dynamic range because it's a mechanical process. So it cannot encode very, very soft sounds because it has the background noise from the vinyl itself. And it also cannot you cannot also store, right? You cannot store very, very loud sounds because what it does, what happens to it is that you actually cause the groove to actually physically skip, right? You actually jump out of the vinyl. So it's always limitations. Very, very early on, right? In the older studios when it comes to vinyl records, Actually, mastering was one of the very first jobs they will get the junior assistants to do, because it's if they sort of understood those kind of that concept, right, of understanding what the dynamic range is, understand what the limitations of the medium, it's easy enough, right, without having to go into mixing and doing all the stuff and the recording engineer. It's an easy enough task lah. I'm not saying that it's easy, like it's actually very hard, very tough to do. Also, it's tough to do well. Okay, so they used to teach junior, junior staff and junior engineers who just came in. They actually teach mastering first. Nowadays, with modern, it's actually the other way around. Now it's not the balik, right? Mastering is usually something that is the last thing, but still, right, useful skill to learn lah. So when we talk about digital, let's talk about CD, right? 16-bit audio. Do you guys remember what's the dynamic range of 16-bit audio? Or I'm going to look back at your notes now. Actually, very easy. Times 6. 16 times 6. Do your maths. 96 dB. So a CD, right? 16-bit audio has 96 dB of dynamic range. 24-bit audio. Now we're all in the digital high resolution. 24-bit is 144 dB. Okay. So 144 dB. Why we now consider 24-bit as high resolution? Because again, let's go back. If you remember the chart when when I was talking about properties of sound, of all the common SPL levels of all the kind of sounds that we encounter in everyday life, right? From the quieter sounds to conversation to traffic sound to a concert sound to the loudest sounds, right? The really, really loudest sounds that we can tolerate before our ears start bleeding, okay, is about 140 plus dB lah, So that is like the sound of, like, say, like a jackhammer, or or a jet engine taking off, right? Or even a gunshot. Even a gunshot is also about that. It's about 150 dB plus, like that. So that is really beyond the limit of what our ear can take lah. So that's why 24-bit is great. It's fantastic because 144 dB of dynamic range really covers, right? It's perfect somehow, right? It's perfect. It covers the dynamic range that our human ear can take, can tolerate. So the thing with CD, okay, is that because digital has technically, theoretically, like I said, it's got no noise floor, and it had that wide dynamic range. It allowed engineers and it allowed people to actually take advantage of that. And what do I mean by that? Okay, it's something that, if not sure whether you guys have heard the term loudness wars. Who has heard of the term loudness wars? The loudness wars. Never heard of it. But I'm sure you might have actually experienced it. Okay, now, any Metallica fans here? So does anyone know the album Saint Anger? So that is a great example, okay, of what the loudness was taken to the extreme. So what happened is that, right, that album, when it was mixed and mastered, the level was so hot, it was so high. Because in digital is a lot more forgiving, you see. You can really use limiting, you can really maximize and squash it, right? Because in digital, as long as you don't exceed 0, you won't distort one. You can, okay? You can squeeze as much level as you want without it distorting. So the trend was that, it started, I guess, in the mid-90s. Actually, it's hard to say when it started. If you talk about where it really started, it actually starts back in the days of radio broadcast. So what is this loudness wars? Okay, now let's go back again to radio broadcast. So let's talk about AM radio stations. So before FM, it was usually AM radio was the ones. So there's actually surveys, it's actually scientifically proven that two things, right? Listener, if they're tuning on the radio, the old radio, they try to find the frequency of the radio station, they were more likely to tune in and continue listening to a station if it is loud, if the level volume is loud and it's clear. So with AM, there's only one way to make it loud and clear. They have to boost the power of the transmitter, right? Meaning you have to pump out more level, right? They have to pump out from the radio transmitter. So that is the way. So not only is the signal, the signal of the AM signal much louder, but also the range of the radio coverage becomes wider, you see. So it became a competition. Which station can, pump up and pump the hottest level and everything. Okay. But with radio, there always comes a limit, lah. Right? I'm sure if you tune into radio, sometimes you will hear, sounds very distorted, very squashed. And that is unfortunately the side effect of the limitations of both AM and FM broadcasts, you see. You get to a certain point where, you can squash the level how loud as possible, but it starts to get distorted already. So Loudness Wars actually start from that. But so when digital started coming in, CDs, it really allowed it allowed the producers, it allowed the artists to really maximize and squeeze the level out of it, out of the CD format, the medium, you see. So what happens is that, again, there's always this assumption that louder is better. I told you, right? There's always, it's a psychoacoustic phenomenon. Something sounds louder, our brain always thinks that, hey, there must be better lah. Wow, must be better. Not necessarily, okay? That's why it's important in mixing and everything. You always do an equal volume comparison. You always need to, listen back. You always need to compensate the gain when you are compressing or EQing to see, are you really making it an improvement, or is it just because it's louder then it sounds better to you, see? So it's very, very important that way. So what kind of happened, right, with CDs is that, again, it became to a point where they are trying to impress people. And we'll talk about the record industry. Who is the first layer of people you are trying to impress? Who are the first bunch of people you're trying to impress? Let's say, if you have a demo or if you have a recording. Oh no, not really the DJs. The first level of people you try to impress would be the record label people, record label executives, the A&R executives, the bosses, the labels, the managers. So if you send in, let's say, your demo, all right, on the CD, there are let's say two different artists, one band. One band sends in a nicely mixed and mastered record at about, let's say, minus 10 dB FS, right, relative level. Another band comes in and gives in a minus 8 dB, which is 2 dB louder. Which one sounds better? Which one seems to impress the record label? When they start to press play, they play the let's say they play the softer one. Okay, nice. Right, very good. Good band. Then the next band is hotter on the CD. You press it, play, boom! It's like, wow! It's like, it kicks butt. It really kicks them in the ass, right? Because it's so much louder. Immediately they psychologically think, wow, this band is so good, man. Let's sign this one. So it became a competition. It became a competition to make your CD, your album louder and louder and louder and louder, because you're trying to make it louder than the rest of the competition, you see. But there is a limitation there. Again, with any kind of medium, any kind of format, there's only so far you can push it before your quality deteriorates. And I'll show you, I'll demonstrate to you, okay? The album which I mentioned, right, Metallica Saint Anger album, really, I think it came to the peak, and then it became something that became public knowledge, public awareness, because that album was so hot and so loud that everything sounds squashed and distorted. Now, at first, people didn't really notice it, but the fans noticed something, because the game, Guitar Hero, right? When the fans heard the version of the song of the mix on Guitar Hero, right, that was in the game, it sounded so much better. Drums, everything was clearer, was punchier, it sounded nicer. Then everyone was like wondering, hey, why it sounds different? Huh? My album sounds like distorted, it's like, gosh, like that, that kind of becomes a wall of sound, but the Guitar Hero version sounded so good. Then that's where actually, right, the public, then a lot of media actually brought attention to that. But this is like mid 2000s lah. So mid 2000s was where this whole thing really reached its peak. Okay. Now, unfortunately, this thing has not gone away. It's 2020. There is still a lot of how to say, there's still a lot of clients, masters, and everything who want their stuff loud. But here's one thing, okay? In the age of CDs and everything, again, as I mentioned, there is a limit, and I'll show you lah. I'll demonstrate, okay? Like what I mean by there's a limit to it. Come fast forward now to 2020, right? Around 2010, the turn of the decade, iTunes, everything's moving towards digital downloads. Everything's now moving into streaming platforms, Spotify, YouTube. This is now predominantly the main way people listen to music nowadays. It's not CD anymore, right? Physical is it's almost dead lah. Considered, right? Many people already consider it dead. A lot of major labels already not even put out physical CDs anymore. Everything's digital. So one thing about digital is that digital there are two things. Firstly, digital platforms, digital streaming, as the bandwidth grows, they actually allow to have high resolution audio. You can actually stream high resolution versions. Of course, usually the high resolutions ones you have to pay lah, like Spotify. There's a premium. Same goes with like Tidal and Pandora. They're all higher resolutions, but you have to pay a premium subscription lah, right? Those who are just free account only, you get the normal one lah, okay? But again, for 99% of the people, they are more than satisfied with it. So one thing about all the digital streaming platforms that many people may not be aware of, okay, but is that they have implemented, right, something that's called playback loudness normalization. What's normalization? What's loudness normalization? Now, actually, if you go into your DAW, it says normalization, right? It actually means a different thing. Normalization means that they are normalizing the peaks to a certain level, right? I do not encourage you to do any sort of normalization whenever you are recording or editing lah. That is not something you should ever touch at all, right? Unless it's a problem. Okay, so there is something called loudness normalization. So loudness normalization is, very simply put, for a certain platform, they have already determined what is the average loudness level they are going to play back their material, their content in. For example, Spotify's, right? Their normalization level, their target loudness is minus 14. The unit actually now it's updated already. It's called LUFS, LUFS, right? Loudness units related to full scale. Now, LUFS is actually almost the same as dBFS lah. It's actually the same, except LUFS takes into account a certain time frame, because it's not just taking the sample from that instance. It actually takes it over average. So you have a short term, you have momentary, right, loudness as well. So basically, this means that on Spotify, no matter how loud you master your track, let's say you mastered, you send to mix and you master, right? Oh, let's make this super loud, right? Let's make it like minus 8 dB FS or minus 7, minus 6 dB FS. Squeeze it until it's squashed so loud, okay? Let's say for a CD. On digital, no matter how loud it is, it's going to get turned down, the volume. If it exceeds the target volume, it's going to get turned down. So there's no benefit. What happens is that the CD just sounds, the track, right, that's highly mastered to a super hot level, hyper compressed, it's just going to sound very, very compressed. Okay, I'll show you guys later. So what does this tell us? It tells us that there's actually no benefit of mastering and hyper compressing your stuff material that loud anymore. There's no longer any benefit. Granted, you have to be aware. Okay, if your master, right, is softer, lower than the target volume, the digital platforms won't raise it. It's only if it exceeds, it will turn it down. And again, it's a logical reason why they do it. They want to do it for a better listening experience by the consumer. Because you imagine you are listening to Spotify, you're listening to this playlist. The playlist got different songs for different artists. If the volume from one song to another, jumps up, down, up, down. It's going to be so annoying. Or even worse, you see, one song very soft, then suddenly the person driving, you know, driving at 150 kilometers an hour. Suddenly the next song, boom, it's like loud, terkejut lah, you know, and then that'll happen, right? So they want to ensure a better listening experience for the consumer. That's why target normalization is applied there. Okay, all right. So once you have a standard loudness level, it just ensures a better listening experience for the consumer. It encourages, right, mixing and mastering engineers to focus on quality, not on the loudness. Because with loudness, right, in order to gain loudness, you have to sacrifice some quality. Again, I'll demonstrate. You hear it very clearly, right? You hear immediately what I mean. Let's see what example. Oh, okay, right. Actually, one more thing related to this loudness. Broadcasting has already implemented this many years, way earlier than music lah. So broadcast as in TV, right? TV broadcast, film, right? Movie cinemas, they already have that. Though there are sometimes still one or two movies which they mix annoyingly loud. Okay, it usually is very annoying. Like you can hear, right? It's like super loud one. After a while, you really sakit telinga. So broadcast TV has already implemented this many years ago. In fact, right, in US they have legislation. It's called the Calm Act. I think even in Europe, in the EU as well, it is all legislated. There is law and you have to follow on broadcast. Your volume level cannot exceed. It must be this one. So there's actually law for it. Okay, if you violate the law, fine, man, you get fined. Okay, so if you are the broadcaster lah. So unfortunately, when it comes to music, there is no such law in place yet lah. It's still, we call the wild west. Anything goes for now, right? Hopefully, gradually these things will change lah. Okay, so let's go into mastering this track. Okay, so like I said, mastering, you can always look at it in a micro level, right? Micro level here, it means that you take a look at the individual track, one song. But more importantly, and it's a bit of a that people forget because everything now is driven by singles. It's a singles driven market. A lot of people forget that originally the mastering engineer's job, right, used to deal with albums. So you're talking about EPs and albums, like maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 songs or more. So there is also the overall big picture look at, let's say, an album. Here's where the main misconception is. A lot of people think that mastering is about level. All they think is about level. Oh, make it loud. But again, for the same reasons I explained to you lah. I have a saying which goes related to level. I call it, right, loudness is inversely proportional to your own insecurity as an artist or as a label, right? If you are not so sure about the quality of your song, you're not so sure about how good your song, your hook, your melody, or how good your recording, your production is, again, the easiest way to overcome all those insecurities is to make it loud lah. Right? As the joke goes lah, right? Fix it in the mastering. So let's go into that. Let's look into the micro verse. So yes, it is about making sure that you master to appropriate levels, because again, if it's too soft, too low, right, in the end the listener will have to turn up very loud, then you get a bit of noise, you get some hiss. Okay, so you want to achieve some amount of level, but what is the amount of level are we talking about lah? That's kind of comfortable lah. Beyond that, a mastering engineer's job also, right, is to make sure that the final master is going to translate well across all systems. That's actually also the job of a mixing engineer. So we want our mix to sound good not only in the studio, but we want to sound good in a car. We want to sound good over a club, over a concert PA system. We want it to sound good, right, on a TV. We want it to sound good on headphones or even on a smartphone, on small speakers, big speakers, everything. We want it to sound good as across as many different listening systems as possible. But here the mastering engineer takes it another level, okay? Right? they also want to try to have the same goal as well, to make sure the mix translates well. So a mastering engineer, number one, usually will a real proper mastering engineer lah. Number one, first of all, they would need to have a room acoustics that is very very accurate. This room is not good enough for mastering. Even my studio, my home, my studio also is not really up to the level of mastering. There are very very few, right? Mastering the acoustics, right? The level of the acoustic and accuracy for a mastering room needs to be the best that money can buy lah. Because if you are mastering is also, we also call it as the final QC, quality control. If your final quality control, let's say I mixed it in here, but I send it to somebody who masters and they're just doing it in their bedroom on a computer, they are already their acoustics is already at a lower quality than my studio or this studio already. What's the logic in that? It doesn't make any sense lah. Okay. Now, there are again several other analogies we can always use. I always explain to people like that because mastering is a specialized job. Same thing, right? If you are looking for if you need a brain surgery done, you go look for a brain surgeon. You go look for a surgeon. You don't go to the clinic and ask the doctor to do brain surgery for you, right? Go to a specialist, right? If you have something issue with liver or lung, you go to a specialist lah. You don't go to the clinic doctor, right? Because they are not going to able to do the job well for you. Okay. Now, having said all that, okay, proper mastering is, like I said, is meant. It should be something that is done by a specialist. If you were to get all the mastering engineers in the world, let's say there are let's say lah, just imagine, okay, there's 100 right audio engineers in Malaysia. Let's say 100 lah, okay. Out of that 100, you only have 2 or 3 who are mastering engineers. That's how rare they are. They make up a tiny percent, right? And I'm saying real mastering engineers lah. So now actually in Malaysia, I would say we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. But to me, right, there's only 4 real mastering engineers. And surprisingly enough, it's actually the same people for the past 20 years now. The same persons. There hasn't been actually anyone new in the past 20 years who is really a real mastering engineer, right? So mastering engineers are usually very experienced, the most experienced people. Again, with the right equipment, they have the right, right monitoring, acoustics, right, would usually be top notch. So there's very, very few. Again, back to my earlier point, you are trying to make sure, you are trying to ensure that your final product goes to a final quality check. You would always want to go and send it and have someone who has much better ears, much better listening, much better acoustic than your place to do this final step of quality control, right? Instead of someone who doesn't, right? Or someone who just does it on a computer with a few plugins, So again, there's no logic behind it to me, okay? Now, having said all that, okay, back to another circle. Now, reality is that not everyone has the budget to do it lah. On average here, actually, mastering actually is cost between 300 to about 400 ringgit per song for even the experienced people. It's around that. Now, if you look at the overall big picture of the budget, actually is not that much. It's for me, it's like a worthwhile investment lah. But there are some clients who, and you cannot blame them also, maybe they are really tight on the budget, so they can't afford that extra 300-400 ringgit, you see. So they will rather save the 300 ringgit and put it elsewhere lah. So again, nothing wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So when it comes to that, and I think when you work with other people and you start getting your own clients, you will face that issue lah, right? So I face that issue all the time as well, because not everyone will have the budget. So what happens is that very often I will have to do mastering. Okay, so now what I will do, okay, is that generally, personally, I only will watch and be careful of the levels. I just master it and just make sure that the levels are good enough for release. And a lot of the stuff that I've worked on in the past has always been that. Okay, it has already been put out on radio. It's just been mastered with the levels. Okay, it's perfectly fine. Sometimes you will encounter lah. So if that kind of situation happens, you just do the best job that you can lah, right? If they don't have a budget. For me, I try to encourage. I always try to encourage. If you can have that budget, I recommend you send to a mastering engineer to do it. If they got a budget, good lah. But if not, no worries, okay? I will still do the master for them. But I will make them aware and tell them, hey, for a real mastering job, I always have to tell them, always best to always send to a specialist to do it lah. So even I will never ever call myself a mastering engineer, because firstly, I don't have the acoustics for it. I don't have the proper equipment for it lah. Okay, even this stuff in here also isn't really, none of it in here is really for mastering grade, except for maybe the interface lah. So mastering grade stuff is way higher than all of this. So let's go into this, right? So this is, I bounced down the track for In Vain just now.